This is Aaron Hobson of Rhinebeck School of Music, and in this lesson we're going to talk about secondary dominants. Alright, so let's go down the list. A dominant chord, I should say a functioning dominant chord, in functional harmony is a 5 chord of a key. So, everybody knows the key is C by now, hopefully, and the 5 chord is G. So you can make that a major chord or a dominant 7 chord, and that 5 chord has a strong pull to lead back to the 1 chord. So that's what a dominant chord is. A primary dominant chord is a major or dominant 7 chord that is in a diatonic key. So basically what I just explained. In the key of C, you have the 5 chord, and it wants to go back to the 1 chord, which is C. So in the key of C, G7 or G is the primary dominant. So now that leads us to, what is a secondary dominant? It's a major or dominant 7 chord that is not in the diatonic key. It's borrowed from another key to create a sense of tension or surprise. So here's a good way to start thinking about your secondary dominants. Write out the key of C with all the chords in the key of C, which would be C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major or G7, A minor, B minor 7 flat 5, or B diminished if it's a triad, back to C. Now what you're going to do is in between each of those chords, you are going to insert a dominant 7 chord or a major chord that is a 5th away from your target. So let me show you. So here we have the key of C, and between each chord I've placed a secondary dominant. So between C and D minor I have A or A7, because A or A7 is a 5th away from D minor. So on the guitar, if we're talking about the key of C, here's an easy way to think about this. So here's my major scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, all on the A string. Now your 5ths on guitar, if you're on the A string, are just a string above. So if this is my C chord, my 5 chord is right above it on the E string, right? So here's my C, here's my G7. Now if I go to the next chord, D minor, if I just go up a string to A or A7, that's my 5 chord of D minor. If I go to E minor and I go up a string to B or B7, that's the 5 of E minor. Now here's my F major. If I go up to the top string here and I play a C chord just above it, that's my 5 of F. Now I'm on to G major. If I go up, I have D major or D7. That's the 5 of G. I'm going to do E minor down, or A minor down here. So here's my A minor. Here's my E. Back to A minor. And the B diminished, I'm going to leave out for now because you can't really resolve to a diminished chord. If you want to take an F sharp secondary dominant, put it before there and resolve it to another chord, we can talk about that later. But generally speaking, you're not going to have a secondary dominant before your diminished chord if you're resolving to your diminished chord, because diminished chords you can't resolve to as a 1 chord. So I'm just going to write some progressions that are going to resolve right to the tonic of that secondary dominant. And that's the easiest way to start using these. But there's a couple rules to think about. One is there is no secondary dominant for the 1 chord because the 1 chord already has a dominant, which is, in the case of C, the G7, and it's the primary dominant. And the second one I explained earlier, to have a secondary dominant before a diminished chord is weird because obviously you can't resolve to a diminished chord. If you're talking about jazz or doing something funky, we can talk about that later, where you can take a secondary dominant, resolve it to another chord, but we're going to leave that out for now because that's a little bit trickier. And on the secondary dominant of the 4 chord, it has to be a dominant 7. The C has to be a C7, otherwise it's just the tonic of the key. So to make it different, you have to have a dominant 7 chord before the 4 chord. So now here's just some progressions you can practice, and you can try this in any key. I'm starting it in C. So the first progression, we are going to play C to the A7, which is the secondary dominant of D minor, the 2 chord, and then we're going to go to the 5 chord. So here we go. C, A7, D minor to G. Okay, now we're going to go to the next secondary dominant, which is B7, and we're going to resolve it to E minor. So here we go. C, B7, which is secondary dominant for the 3 chord, E minor, D minor, G, C, B7, E minor, D minor, G. Now here we go, we're going to do the secondary dominant of the 4 chord, which is F. So we're going to go C, C7 to F to G. So C, C7 to F to G. Now we're going to do the secondary dominant of the 5 chord, which is D7. So here we go. C, D7, G7 to C. And again, C, D7, G7 to C. Now we're going to do the secondary dominant of the 6 chord, which is A minor. So we're going to go C, E7, A minor to G. C, E7, A minor to G. All right, so we've used all of them in a progression in the key of C. If you're rusty on your fifths and thinking about what a fifth is, like I said, you can use the little cheat where you can go right above, or you can refer to a diagram called the circle of fifths, which has all the fifths in a little circle, and you can figure out it from there in a very quick way. So now we have to name these. So notating your secondary dominants is probably the trickiest part of all of this. So you'll notate it as like 5 of 2 or 5 of 3. So the 5 is always the same. It's always going to be a dominant chord, which is your 5 chord. The second letter refers to its place in the original key. So for example, the first one, A7, is the 5 of which chord in the original key? D minor, which is the 2 in the key of C. B7 is the 5 chord of E minor, which is the 3 chord of the key of C. C7 is the 5 chord of the 4. F is the 4 of C. D7 is the 5 of G7. G7 is the 5 of C. So that's the 5 of 5, secondary dominant. E or E7 is the 5 of A minor, and A minor is the 6th chord in the key of C. So that's how you figure it out. It's kind of a little roundabout way. You might have to do a little mental gymnastics, but the more that you think about it and use this information, the easier it'll get. So let's get to a couple of recent songs I've done with students that had secondary dominance. So we're going to do Blue by the Jayhawks, key of E major. I'm going to show it here. So what I've done is I've written out all the chords in the key of E, and I've put the secondary dominants before each chord in the key just to make it easy to sort of look at for now. So the secondary, the song's in E. And then in the chorus, it goes to the 6 minor chord, which is C sharp minor, and it goes to an F sharp. So F sharp is normally minor in that key, but it's a 5 of 5 secondary dominant, right? It's F sharp, and it's leading to the B, which is the 5 of E. So here's something else that's cool. So I've taught you how to resolve each secondary dominant to the next chord in the key. However, you don't always have to do that. And so these song examples are going to show you that just because you have this F sharp, that is the 5 of 5, doesn't necessarily mean you have to resolve it to the B. In this case, they're just sort of floating it between the 6 minor and then going to the E after that. And then G sharp is normally a minor chord in the key, but it's a major chord here, so that's another secondary dominant. And that is the 5 chord for the 6 minor, which is C sharp, but it's not going to the C sharp minor, it's going to A, which is the 4 chord, to the 5. So you can see that you don't necessarily have to resolve these to the target chord. you can resolve it to somewhere else in the key. So here we go. You brought me through, and you made me feel so blue. Why don't you stay behind? So blue. Why don't you stop and look at what's going down? The next one is Rainbow by Casey Musgraves. This one's in the key of D. So I'm going to show the key of D with all the secondary dominants. And this is just sort of an exercise that you can do when you're learning a key or learning something. Is write it out as a visual and get in the practice of that. So it's right there and you can see it. So this one, you'll see it goes to that 6 minor and then the 5 of 6 dominant leading to the 1 chord. And then another place where this happens is the B minor to the E7, which is the 5 of 5, resolving to the 5. All right, so here we go. So tie up the boat, take off your coat, and take a look around. Everything is all right now, 'cause the sky is finally opened. Rain and wind stop blowing, but you're stuck out in the same old storm again. Let go of your umbrella, but darling, I'm just trying to tell you that there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head. All right, the next example is in the key of C. Build Me Up Buttercup by the Foundations. So I'm going to show the key of C with all the secondary dominants for a visual. And you'll notice, so we have our 1 chord going to the 5 of 6, E7 there, because that's the 5 chord for A minor, which is the 6 chord for C. And then you have a 5 of 4 with the C to the C7 going to the F. And then we talked about making these 4 chords minor in another video, Borrowed Harmony. And that's another common device musically. So why do you build me up, buttercup baby, just to let me down and mess me around? And then worst of all, you never call baby when you say you will. But I love you still, I need you more than anyone, darling. You know that I have from the start. So build me up, buttercup, don't break my heart. All right, so that's just kind of a primer. Used all major keys. You can do these in minor keys. I'll do another video in the future using minor examples and talking about minor keys, but this is just trying to keep it simple for now. And if you've enjoyed watching this, please subscribe. Visit www.rhinebeckschoolofmusic.com. Become a patron. www.patreon.com/rhinebeckschoolofmusic. See you at the next one.